2023 already sucks. On January 10th, Jeff Beck died at the age of 78. He was one of the greatest guitarists who ever lived, a huge influence on me personally. I have vivid memories of performing Freeway Jam as a kid, notably with my late mentor, Ron Scott. Every time I play my original song, You and Only You, I'm reminded how much he influenced it. Jeff Beck first gained notoriety with the Yardbirds, just as Eric Clapton and Jimmy Page had done. And when he set out on his own, he just continued to grow as a guitarist and artist. If you listen to 1968's Truth and 2010's Emotion and Commotion, it's amazing how much his tone and vocabulary evolved, and yet there's still a signature touch of his. He didn't really sing outside of a few tracks here and there, which might explain why he never achieved Eric Clapton's popularity. Instead, he collaborated with singers like Rod Stewart, Bobby Tench, and Joss Stone. So it's fitting that perhaps his most famous album is mostly instrumental, Blow by Blow, which happens to be one album I don't own on vinyl. Seriously, if anybody wants to send me a copy, I will gladly accept it. But this CD here certainly got a lot of spins when I was coming of age. I believe my parents actually had a cassette of the album at one time. I just love how unapologetically original it is. Having Beatles producer George Martin behind the console certainly helped. But overall, it's such a unique blend of hard rock, funk, and fusion jazz with Jeff's guitar acting as the lead voice, occasionally joined by keyboardist Max Middleton.
Jazz is something that you have to sort of define. I must admit I was veering towards some sort of jazz, but it's just electric rock, high-powered rock and very explicit rock.
I was actually reminded, why the hell didn't I include this in the History of Rock 70s video? It did at least cover Truth in the 60s. Well, I'm gonna make up for it now and give this album a proper review. Let's look at the band first. We got Jeff on guitar, obviously. I already mentioned Max Middleton on keyboards, who had played on his previous albums, and also co-wrote several songs with Jeff. We have session bassist Phil Chen and drummer Richard Bailey. George Martin had been working with the Mahavishnu Orchestra, so he seemed like the perfect candidate to produce this all-instrumental album.
I was advised by someone pretty high in the record industry at that time saying, "Don't touch Jeff Beck, he's a loser." I said, "No, I think he's a great guitar player, and he will sit down with a battered guitar and make the most incredible sound, things which other people just couldn't do." And all I was able to do then was to work around that, take the best bits, and then sort of sew something around it.
Jeff had previously performed on the BBC program Five Faces of Guitar, where he covered the Beatles song She's a Woman in one of the earliest showcases of a talk box.
It's just a bag.
The bag.
I won't tell you what's inside it. No, the sound comes up this tube. The guitar sound, nothing else.
The guitar out the tube.
Yeah, there's no voice at all.
Obviously, George Martin had opinions on this reggae-ish arrangement of a song he originally produced, but Jeff liked the arrangement, so it was kept on the album. It's fascinating to hear such an iconic Beatles tune be rearranged in this funk jazz setting with more relaxed dynamics. Jeff's interpretation of the melody really becomes his own. But let's start at the beginning. You Know What I Mean, written by Jeff and Max. It's funky, it's rockin', it's got a unique 6/4 break on the bridge. It's everything you want a 70s jazz rock opener to be. I've mentioned before, I love 70s funk, and this era was practically its peak. James Brown, Average White Band, Earth, Wind & Fire, Stevie, who we'll get to in a minute. Disco hadn't quite overtaken it yet. It still had its roots in rock and roll and blues, so Jeff feels really at home here. There's a bit of that Beck-Ola vibe in his soloing, the hard picking, the way he kind of attacks the strings almost like it's a drum. It really is some of his best playing. The cover features Jeff playing a Gibson Les Paul, but he was better known for playing a Fender Stratocaster. Anytime you hear him rocking his whammy bar, that's definitely his Strat. He also received a Telecaster with humbucker pickups from Seymour Duncan, which is all over this album. And on top of the soloing, the melody to You Know What I Mean, a duet between Jeff's guitar and Max's synth, is so damn catchy. Honestly, any song where Max is listed as a co-writer features a memorable melody. I think that's why this album did so well. Great soloing and playing aside, these are memorable melodies you can sing along to, even without lyrics. While Constipated Duck focuses more on the tight funk grooves, that clav really does sound like a constipated duck, the way it comes in not quite following the rhythm section. Air Blower is another great example of those memorable melodies, credited to the whole band. It's fun getting solos from both Jeff and Max, who takes a Rhodes solo, really hammering in some effective chromatic licks. And this is where the progressive rock element comes in. We come to this 9/4 halftime groove. It's very chill, but not without a sense of looming tension, like a calm before the storm. And when Scatterbrain starts, storm it does. This is the most musically adventurous of the tunes. The 9/8 groove is much faster, Jeff plays a complicated guitar motif, and George Martin underscores the track with his trademark orchestration.
In the string writing, well, I was able to echo a lot of the stuff that he'd been doing and provide a counterpoint for it and then not be obtrusive again.
Jeff's vocabulary in the guitar solo just feels so different than anything else he had previously done in the past. Jeff really agonized over his guitar parts, constantly wanting to replace and redo them. In fact, at one point, he phoned up George Martin saying he wanted to get back in the studio and redo a guitar part, and George had to say to him, Jeff, the record's already being pressed. Needless to say, his dedication to his craft really shows. If Scatterbrain is a display of his fast technical prowess, Because We've Ended as Lovers counterpoints with his ability to deliver a tender ballad with each sustaining note filled with emotion. It was written by Stevie Wonder, initially for his ex-wife Sarita, who included it on her second album, produced by Stevie himself. That must have been an awkward session. But without a single word uttered, Jeff conveys all the complex emotions of this divorce. He actually dedicated the song to fellow guitarist Roy Buchanan, and I can definitely see the influence. Again, this really does show the range of his playing. Honestly, listening to it again, I think this might be one of his most adventurous solos. The dexterity of his touch and tone, those fast chromatic licks, the way he just bends into the stratosphere, all while never losing contact with the melody. I just felt chills running down my spine listening to it again, realizing that we've lost one of the greatest guitar players who ever lived. Stevie Wonder himself contributes clav to Thelonious, most likely a tribute to Thelonious Monk, and it brings the energy back up to a funk jam. Jeff and Stevie had worked together before, Jeff performing on the album Talking Book. In fact, Superstition was originally written for Jeff, but realizing its potential as a single, Stevie wisely put it out himself, and the rest is history. And then comes the big guitar showpiece, actually written by Max, Freeway Jam. How many times I remember this song blasting while I was actually stuck in a freeway jam on the 405. And obviously it's a play on words as a jam session. It's one of the more simple tunes on the album, a shuffle in G with a short turnaround played twice. And with a singable melody, it's probably why the song is so accessible. But it really gives Jeff a chance to stretch out. I really like that he doesn't play the melody right away. He takes his time, playing some sparse licks with spaces in between. It gives Max and Richard a chance to stretch out a little bit. And once that melody does come in, it is so satisfying. You know, in listening to it again, I don't hear that Jeff's playing anything that doesn't resemble his licks from his previous albums. I think it's more the interplay with the rest of the band that makes the track so special, how Richard follows his syncopated licks, how Phil builds the bass line, and Max's solo to take us out in a nice deviation from the melody. It really reminded me of just how magical live performance can be with the right players. This was just a moment in time when Jeff was on top of his game. The album ends with a nice ballad called Diamond Dust, written by fellow guitarist Bernie Holland, who had formed the band Hummingbird with some of Jeff's bandmates from the previous albums. George Martin is featured again as orchestrator, and the way his arrangements echo Jeff's guitar is sublime. It's easy to see why this album was so popular, and why in many ways it's considered Jeff Beck's artistic peak. He and George Martin would go on to release Wired a year later, and that album's great too. but it's different. It doesn't quite have that same rawness that Blow by Blow has. But that just shows why Jeff was an artist's artist. He didn't want to keep doing the same thing. He didn't want to repeat himself. He wanted to keep evolving as an artist. And that's partially what makes Blow by Blow so special. Like I said, it was just this moment in time. Jeff had a statement to make. He made it in spades. And then he moved on, not tainting its legacy. And what a legacy it leaves. Blow by Blow gets a goldfish from me without question. It's hard for me to pick an essential track, they're all really good. I think I'd personally have to go with Freeway Jam, because of the nostalgia it brings up for me, and on top of being such a kick-ass track. But 'Cause We've Ended as Lovers is equally essential. I gotta also include the proggy Scatterbrain, and You Know What I Mean is such a great opener. Jeff, thank you for leaving such an amazing legacy. Thank you for being such an inspirational player to me personally. You will never be forgotten. Rest in peace, good sir.